Hi, Salesforce is a coverage obsessed organization, but sometimes bad design and deadlines can push devs to use invasive tools like PowerMock to cut corners and achieve higher coverage, which is synthetic. Named after the god of faking, Loki is a toolkit that promotes ports and adapters a clean architecture but mitigates the architectural summoning. Let's check out the problem it solves. We usually interact with the external systems directly from our domain logic, which makes them difficult to test. Let's look at an example. The simple function uses data from a POJO and transforms into an entity object. To unit test this, we should pull out our sledgehammer PowerMock. After all the hassle of preparing classes for test, mocking static methods, and multiple vendens, let's run this test with coverage. Wow, we achieved 100% test coverage. But the sad truth is, this test isn't testing any prod code. It prepared a mock and asserting on the same. So sneaky. PowerMock is a painkiller as it makes it too easy to avoid thinking about design ailments and focus on coverage. The synthetic coverage can disguise your coverage dashboards, which is dangerous. It altogether is a new framework to learn. It results in brittle tests that are hard to maintain. It's not transparent and involves a lot of setup and trial and error to get it right, due to which we either skip writing unit tests or end up writing tests that are not testing the actual domain logic. But what's the right way? The right way is the hard way. That is to follow ports and adapters of a clean architecture. Let's briefly understand this architectural pattern with a 1-minute crash course. We should isolate our domain logic from external systems with a shell made up of ports. A port is nothing but a Java interface which gives a level of indirection, and we can have adapters implementing it. Prod adapters stand between your domain and the external systems, doing the external calls for you. While unit testing, we can inject fake adapters for these ports so our domain logic can be tested in isolation. Let's check out how we can refactor our service to follow this architectural pattern. Instead of making a direct call, we are going via these adapters, and this is their implementation. As you can notice, this is just an adapter pattern to wrap external calls. During unit testing, we can fake these ports so we can focus on testing the domain logic, which is data transformation in this case. Here is the fake implementation of these ports. But that's so much ceremony to test a simple method, writing adapters for prod and fake, etc. This friction is definitely not dev friendly. Agreed. Can I have the cake and eat it too? That is, how can I focus on testing my domain logic without all this ceremony? What if I told you these two ports, adapters, and even the fakes are sponsored by none other than Loki? Introducing Loki, a ports and adapters toolkit. Let's check out how this verbose code and tests are simplified using Loki. As you can see, Loki already has his ports declared and adapters implemented. You can easily auto-wire them with Spring like this. And for the unit tests, you can auto-wire the pre-built fakes from Loki so you can peacefully focus on testing your transformation logic. But wait, there is more to it. Loki has its own in-memory layer which we call the dud layer. This lets the fakes to be smart and interconnected. Let's see the dud layer in action. But first, let's understand the prod sample scenario where your domain logic uses entity object accessor to fetch invoice line object from UD. Next, the domain logic uses this invoice line object to call the tax app again through a port. Tax app then uses this invoice line object details to prepare a request and make an actual callout. Again, if the tax caller is successful, you get a JSON response in which invoice line object ID is populated. During the test, as we replace them with fake adapters, entity object accessor fake returns as a mock invoice line object, and we pass that to the tax app fake adapter. Now this tax app fake adapter needs to simulate a fake response, but where can it get the details of mock invoice line object? It's a mock, right? So we might need to resort to all the when then return setup, which quickly turns cumbersome as we get a need to deal with more such details. But guess what? The dud layer to the rescue. It generates random data whenever the mock is queried for a field and caches in an in-memory key value stored. Other fakes like tax app fake adapter relying on such data can interact with the dud layer to maintain consistency between the fake data returned to the domain. In this case, it gets back the mock invoice line object details from the dud layer and uses it to prepare fake tax response. Thus, all fakes are smart and interconnected and saving us from writing a ton of when then return setup. All this interaction between fakes is abstracted out from the domain logic, so Loki fools the domain logic to think it's interacting with real external systems. Thus, Loki has all these perks. It lets you unit test your domain logic in isolation, which organically boosts the test coverage. It's transparent and declarative, so the tests written using Loki are easy to maintain. On top of that, it acts as a framework to enforce appropriate DI and promotes clean code. It currently supports these adapters and the corresponding fakes. This list is growing day by day. Loki is modular and you can pick and wire the ones you need. It is being consumed in prod by Rev Delphinus for complex invoice run components, tax step and post-processing step. We achieved an organic code coverage of close to 90% purely with unit tests. Loki is a separate core module and can be consumed across any module in Salesforce core. The code in this demo can be found in the shell, and this is the swarm link. Thank you so much.